Hi everyone, I'm Jennifer. I'm from Singapore, the National Institute of Education. In Singapore, I'm a teacher educator as well as a research scientist. My passion is computer-supported collaborative learning environments to foster 21st century literacies, broadly called, but I really love working in that area of collaborative creativity and collaborative criticality. So today I'm just sharing with you a more qualitative account of our project, which is to develop 21st century critical reading capacities among secondary 3 students through a sort of a collaborative critical reading and learning analytics environment. I was pleasantly surprised when, when the paper was accepted because it was very qualitative in nature. But of course the reviewer said, or one of them said, this is not groundbreaking work. Oh yeah, it's not groundbreaking work, but it's important. Oh, good, so that made me feel good and encouraged. So throughout this week, we heard a lot of, I think, very quantitative papers, very strong, robust papers, and here in Chinese we call it 接地气, like a little bit grounded. I want to privilege the student voice. The issues that this presentation might throw up might not be particularly groundbreaking, but I hope that it makes a modest contribution to enrich our discussions here about some of the problematics, not only the potentialities of learning analytics for fostering enhancing 21st century pedagogy and learning among our young students. So LA affordances increasingly harnessed, as we know, for 21st century teaching and learning, yet relatively rare use cases that are empirically based, that provides understandings from our learners' experiences, particularly in secondary schooling contexts, and especially in Asia, educational contexts. So this paper is a modest contribution of a collaborative critical reading and learning analytics innovation in one Singapore high school. In this presentation, we privilege the student voice and their accounts of the perceived learning benefits and problematics. And we focus solely on, more on the learning dashboard and its components, its visualization components. And what we hope to do here is provide some insights into the potentialities, the paradoxes, the dilemmas, the pathways ahead for designing LA that considers the voices of our young learners as critical stakeholders. So the impetus for our study, critical reading development, we see it as essential for strong language and literacy development. It's fundamental to productive participation in 21st century global knowledge economies. However, our teachers, particularly Singapore teachers of our local context, observed that our students struggle to engage deeply and critically in reading tasks as a form of rich social practice. So the key challenges that have been identified that contribute to this issue is that conventional in our classrooms today, in high school, in our public high schools, conventional print-based English language curriculum generally fails to engage our students in developing multimodal literacies. There are limited opportunities, and these are acknowledged by teachers as well as our policymakers, to extend critical reading activities beyond class time in powerfully engaging ways. And last but not least, there are also limited access to meaningful and timely formative feedback on critical reading engagement and progress and their broader literacy development. So taken together, these tends to constrain the cultivation of language proficiencies and 21st century literacies in our young people. And also, and by 21st century literacies, we're talking here referring to collaborative criticality, communication, self, and socio-generative learning. Therefore, our learning innovation was developed, it was designed with the aspiration of addressing those challenges. And it's a web-based collaborative critical reading and learning analytics environment. It aims to deepen critical reading fluency by allowing for richer dialogue among peers, among learners, around multimodal text, visual, narrative, and informational, and to deepen their appreciation or learners' appreciation for collaborative critical reading as not only an individual reading and writing process, but a generative social practice. On that note, very quickly, just to give you a context of the learning innovation, it has a twofold, Reread, as we call it affectionately, has twofold learning affordances. One is that social collaborative discussion and dialogic learning space, where students, we put up texts and students actually get to negotiate and dialogue around these texts. And second is the visual learning analytics dashboard for students. So I'll go through this very quickly, the pedagogical design and the curricular design behind it, for, in lieu of the tight time that we have. This is further elaborated in my short paper. But the pedagogical design is underpinned by, of course, socio-constructivistic learning theories of peer learning and dialogic learning, but it's underpinned also by a multiliteracies pedagogical framework that was put forth by the New London Group in 1996. And there are papers now, and this pretty much sums up the multiliteracies pedagogical framework, where there are 4 essential knowledge processes: experiencing the known and the new, conceptualizing by naming and theorizing, moving on to critical framing, which is analyzing functionally and critically, and then applying creatively and appropriately. And the pedagogical structures that inform those knowledge processes, moving from situated practice to overt instruction, critical framing, and transformed practice. In terms of a micro-level pedagogical scaffolds that we build in the micro-levels pedagogical scaffolds in the collaborative critical reading platform. So we have 7 critical lenses that's based on Paul Elder's wheel of critical reasoning, as well as 5 critical talk types, which is based on our own work around dialogic indicators of collaborative creativity and criticality. So there you see the 5 critical lenses that students have to apply, and the 5 different critical talk types that they have to tag and pre-tag their comments before they post a comment. And we have hints, which are like the pop-overs when students move over to the message. So they have a text, they want to discuss the message, or they want to dialogue or critique together the message or the intent or the purpose or the audience or the assumptions or point of views in the text. They can hover over that particular critical lens, and we have a hint for them in terms of what are the questions you think about when you want to critique a text in the frame of purpose or in the frame of message. All right? And a new multimodal text was uploaded each week over 16 weeks across 2 semesters. This is the innovation context. And every week, it's approximately 30 minutes of formal reading period in the school. And also students can, of course, log in to this and use their personal informal out-of-class time to engage in this learning. So then the second affordance or learning affordance of Reread is the learning dashboard or the student learning dashboard. This is our first iteration, but it has 4 key components. One, it shows the students their reading achievement. It also shows them their learning attitudes and their 21st century skills, and my critique and discussion profile, and my social learning network map. So I'll show you very quickly what it looks like a little bit in more detail. So my reading achievement is based on data on students' reading grades in school-based assessments throughout the term. And here what you'll see is we have visual text, narrative text, and information texts. And what students see are they see their own score, they see the class average score, and they see the maximum score possible in that particular item. All right. Then under my learning attitudes and 21st century skills, these are data on students' productive 21st century learning dispositions from pre-validated and also our own work. There's student self-report questionnaires at the start, implemented at the start and the end of the term. So just very broadly, we capture students' attitudes about learning English language. So for instance, how confident are they, their self-efficacy, for instance, how attentive or interested do they think they are, and how much do they appreciate that task value, if you're familiar with those quite traditional psychometric measures. But then how they feel, teacher-student relatedness, highest effect size, right, in predicting achievement according to Hattie's recent work. But we also ask them student-teacher relatedness, how comfortable do they feel communicating with their teacher, how supportive they feel that their teacher is in terms of competent support, and how much teacher trust, whether their teacher believes they feel that their teacher believes in them, and how close or alienated they feel from their teacher. In terms of our learning attitudes and 21st century skills, we also capture 5 dimensions of a more skills measure, also through self-report, but so it's SelfConcept, yeah? How imaginative, inventive, curious, and collaborative do they think they are, all right? Do they see themselves as? And these are largely classified under this construct based on my work called cognitive playfulness. And how open are they to new ideas? We also we also give them a sense of how healthy their learning mindset is. If you're familiar with Carol Dweck's work on growth mindset, people can learn about achievement goal orientations. They're quite a related family of studies. So my desire to prove my competence, I learn because I want to prove my competence and ability, and I learn because I have a desire to improve my skills and knowledge. That's our interpretation for the students, but we're actually looking at mastery and performance learning goals. All right, and only in this particular visualization do we have some form of a normative indication for the students, where we try to talk about, well, we have a label there that says red is less healthy, and which is strictly performance oriented, and then more healthy under my desire, under the deeper learning or mastery learning. So there's a normative tag there, but even that is not particularly accurate, after talking through with our students and so on, because it's actually not either or, but it's actually the balance of both performance and mastery that is very important, that we know is helpful for productive learning. So then that's 2. Okay, there's 2 more. This is my reread critique and discussion profile. That's based on their comments and replies and interaction and participation, in terms of their comments, in terms of their replies to one another. And we do 2 things. We capture their online presence in terms of their participation, which is what you see on the left, their word counts over texts over the innovation period. But also we reflect to them their use of the critical lenses and their use of the critical talk types. So what we often see here is that this was quite a common map, where we see our students particularly using or critiquing text in terms of message and in terms of purpose, which are some of the easiest entry points to text critique. Whereas issues deeper critique, such as inference, as implications, they were not really engaged. Students weren't really using those lenses, perhaps due to lack of efficacy or lack of understanding. So this was very helpful to the teachers, actually, when they saw these, because they knew how to facilitate students to engage in the other lenses. And critical talk types, we actually notice this of our students over 16 weeks. And this is not uncommon when we kind of triangulate and look at other published studies, is that our students are quite comfortable in individualized learning, in actually putting out their ideas, putting out their comments. But as a social generative dialogic practice, reading as a dialogic practice and an interactive practice, you see that students are good at putting out their ideas there, maybe even justifying, but not as fluent in agreeing with one another, validating, or challenging. So that again was something that we put forth to our students. And last but not least, the last component is a social learning network map. And these are sociograms that reflect students' learning interactions with their peers on Reread. And we have another one of in-class. In-class is nominated by the questionnaire, but the interactions on Reread is a dynamic one based on their replies and comments and interactions with other peers. So the triangle is the teacher, and the rest is there. So that's just to give you a sense of what students see in these 16 weeks. So they have an opportunity to collaboratively critique and discuss text using a number of pre-specified pedagogical scaffolding scripts of critical lenses, as well as critical talk types. And then we have these visualizations for them in terms of 4 different components. So what were students evaluating for counts of the Reread Student Learning Dashboard? Very quickly, just to give you a sense, it was a design-based research approach, quasi-experimental design. We have secondary 3 students, which are grade 9, 15-year-olds, There were 3 Reread classes, and so, you know, that 100 over students, and 3 control classes, so 92 students. So we had both quantitative and qualitative data collection and analysis methods, but today I'll be focusing particularly on the students' qualitative accounts. All right, so all the students, 30 of them, all the students who used Reread or participated in Reread, 30 of them participated in the focus groups, and all the rest filled in a qualitative feedback form, asking a number of questions around perceived usefulness, challenges, and so on. All right. So very quickly, they were generally positive, okay, about how easy it was to navigate and understand and use the visualizations. At least they thought it was so. They were moderately positive about the helpfulness of the dashboard components for their learning and growth. And these were the 4 dashboard components, right? So marginally preferred the critique and discussion profile, which was quite nice because it was about collaborative critical reading. And so this is the whether they felt the dashboard was useful for enhancing their 21st century learning in terms of 4 dimensions, in terms of socialization, in terms of expression of identity and opinions, in terms of developing their 21st century skills and dispositions, as well as for achieving higher academic learning and performance. I have scales and the items and the instruments for all of these if you're interested. But I'll just, these just to give you a sense, that there were also demonstrable learning gains, not only self-reported instruments, even though I think self-reported instruments have a place because it's about felt, you know. Anyway, that's for another time. But demonstrable learning gains in terms of online participation behavior. So what you see on the left in terms of the network map, the purple dot is one of the students. This was before and after they saw their visualizations. So in a lab session, before and after, they had access to the dashboard components. So one of the students, for example, just on the left, saw where they were in the social network learning map, and after moving to a more central or engaged position within the learning network. On the left top there, you see the number of, frequency, basically participation, before and after being shown, being visualized, their behavior. But you know, this was, and also quantitatively, we also see observed significant differences between the Reread groups and the control groups, all right, in terms of learning engagement, for one, teacher-student relatedness, and critical reading fluency, performance on the test. Okay, but all of that is context, and I only have 5 minutes left. My friends, my colleagues said, if you want Jen to present for 15 minutes, she only is limited to 5 slides, but I've got 30, so I don't know how I'm going to get through it. So, but anyway, we're almost there. So the more interesting things, the learner accounts of benefits, the experience realities, we found that, we noted 3 overarching themes: generating greater awareness and reflection, enhancing learning motivation and engagement, and cultivating what we coined to be reciprocal social citizenry in learning. So I'm sorry I went a little bit crazy with the red. You know, I was trying to highlight to myself that those were important words. But these are students' comments, all right? So they talked about the 3 different types. So my Reread discussion data and my social learning network profile were useful in monitoring my progress, shows which skills and critical lenses I have not used, which allows me to know which skills I should practice more on. I found my reading achievement dashboard most useful, helps me to gauge my progress or how much progress I have made, as well as how I fare against other students. Through this, I can know what I can work on in order to improve. And what we found was recurrent was that students often pointed to the learning attitudes and 21st century skills as the most eye-opening in their word. It allowed them to realize what type of attitude I had, this was one student, towards learning English. I've come to realize that my attitude towards learning English language was not the best, as I only learnt for the sake of doing well in exams and not for the sake of understanding the language. Very common for Singapore students. Such a high-stakes education system. So looking at it, I'm trying to change my learning habits and attitudes in a more positive and better and more positive direction. One thing we noted, students talked about how it was most eye-opening. And this was a segue for us to talk to teachers about how most often these are the least visible when we teach and when we interact with our students, that learning attitudes and 21st century skills are usually the most latent when we interact with our students. And there is space to make those more visible so that they're literate about what 21st century skills are, or the importance of learning attitudes. Secondly, well, related, students also had accounts of how knowing where they stand motivates them to work harder. So there was learning motivation and engagement, makes them more motivated to comment, and they always refer to the social network dot. They want their social network dot to become bigger and brighter, and I will know who to look to for help. So we just want to highlight that there's potential of social transparency for self and socio-regulated learning, and that learner autonomy, competence, and relatedness are vital to intrinsic motivation and sustained behavioral change. Thirdly, cultivating reciprocal social citizenry in learning. The spider web, some of our bubbles were bigger, right? So it showed us who we can find if we ever need any help in English. And some of the people whose bubbles were smaller, they're out of the web, so we can ask them whether they need any help. So these were students' voices about how social network analytics was useful for them to be able to develop a capacity to shift their focus away from self-interest or self-sufficiency to engage in productive help-giving and help-seeking learning behaviors. Can I have 3 more minutes? I don't know. I'll just, throw these up there. There are 2 problematics, right? One was that students in their talk had talked about the learning visualizations as a double-edged sword. Not new, but I wanted to highlight that there was a real polarizing nature. Students were polarized between norm-reference and criterion reference visualizations. There was talk about some loved it. Some loved the fact that they were norm-referenced, and they found norm-reference visualizations motivating. All right, which you will see there. Some even called for a formal ranking system. And these were not necessarily high-performing students. So they talk about gaming theories there. But some did not love it so much, all right, because they talked about things about being demoralizing, about it being depressing. And the dilemma was that they were not necessarily low-performing students either. All right, that was one thing I wanted to bring out. And the SNA, well then, the second big point I thought that was important was that we needed to, to me, we noted that it was an imperative to foster connective literacy. What we mean by connective literacy was that we saw students reflecting a sort of prevailing schooling hegemony of individual learning outcomes and skill acquisition as being more important than social learning connections or interactions. And you can see that their talk there. All they're interested is the content of the comments. So there's space for more intentional and purposeful pedagogical efforts, all right, to nurture these reciprocal social learning network capital among our students. So limitations and pathways forwards, that's the last slide, is that we're working on the teacher dashboard. Our visualizations are admittedly rudimentary. We had a visiting professor come tell us that, oh, it's really ugly, but it's great work, but it's really ugly. So we're working on it, it's admittedly. And automated text mining, so we're really inviting help from teams like Simon, Carolyn, and our friends in Hong Kong to come and help us with automated text mining processes. And the adaptivity and personalization of the dashboard to account for diverse learner needs. So to conclude, I just want to highlight that it's not new, but it's an important conversation about this pedagogical dilemma between structure and agency. Because what we see is that it's really polarizing, it's paradoxical. It's not just about the fact that peer reference, norm-reference visualizations are bad, and that criterion visualizations are good. Some benefit from it, some don't. And really, our best of intentions often come wrapped in barbed wire. And therefore, how can we, I think, as a community, think about, as pedagogical scientists as well as learning scientists, think about how we can design for agency, but at the same time structure for discomfort. And that's a shared burden as well as an inspiration. Thank you.
Thank you. So I don't think we have now time for maybe one question. Yeah. Just give me.
Thank you very much. Great talk. So much in there. I have to look at the paper.
Yes.
My interest is in cultural differences, and I think when it comes to dashboards, and you did this in a context that's more Eastern,
Yes.
there might be some interesting differences with how people interpret these visual cues from an Eastern versus Western perspective, going back to work from Hazel Marcus and many other people who've looked at cultural differences, especially when it comes to the descriptive norms that are being shown, how you interpret the descriptive norms, whether you want to move toward the norm or want to stand out. And this can be helpful for people who are doing worse than the norm, but dangerous for people who might fall back, maybe develop more of a fixed mindset instead of a more growth mindset when they see that they're outperforming their peers in terms of mindset. How do you think about these differences, and do you think adaptive visualizations are a solution to it?
Yes, yes, and I absolutely think, well, two things. I think adaptivity and personalization is really important, but at the same time, we shouldn't just, well, as much as it's important to privilege and listen and respond to the student voice, students often don't know in totality what might be good learning. And that's why my point about that sometimes we do need to structure for discomfort, that sometimes we can't just, it has to be adaptive and personalized, but not necessarily only based on their preference, because sometimes we do want to structure for discomfort, and that's just good pedagogy and good learning. So this dilemma comes into play. About cultural differences, I think in Singapore, Singapore is a multi-ethnic, community, and often it's classified, conveniently classified as Eastern. And I'm not saying it's not Eastern. It's 70%, I guess, Chinese or Confucian, influenced. But it's multicultural, and there's space, I think, to explore these cultural differences in terms of students' responses to these visualizations.